One morning on August 10th, 2024, around 6:45 a.m. in Miami, Florida, this is usually around the time, early morning, people are usually going to work, going to school, you just wake up. Around this time, you're usually still a little bit groggy because you had just woken up maybe an hour or two before. You're just trying to make it through the day, make it to your school, make it to your work. But as you're about to enter onto the highway, you see that there is a cluster of cars all trying to get onto the highway. So you're thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting in this traffic. I have somewhere to be. You notice that the reason why all this traffic is started is because there's a woman lying topless in the middle of the road, exactly where people need to enter into the highway, but people are starting to drive around her. And just a block away from this highway entrance was actually a fatal 3-car accident that the woman on the floor just committed. Around 6:45 a.m., there was a 3-car accident at an intersection in the middle of Miami, Florida. There were 3 cars involved: a black Range Rover, a silver Suzuki, and a white Mercedes. The white Mercedes was actually the car to cause this accident, and they caused this accident by driving 80 miles an hour in a 30 running through a red light. And at first, the white Mercedes had hit the black Range Rover, causing the Range Rover to spiral and then hit another car, which was a silver Suzuki. This car accident was fatal. And when the police got there, they reported to the black Range Rover, which only had 1 victim in the car, and they were taken to the hospital and turned out to be physically okay. When they looked into the silver Suzuki was crushed, essentially. And at the scene were actually 5 ambulances and 2 officers, because the silver Suzuki was crushed so badly that they needed to take out a piece of the car just to get to the victims that were inside. Inside the silver Suzuki was a woman named Juliana, and in the back seat was her husband Abraham, as well as his friend Jesus. And at the time, Juliana was driving her husband and her husband's friend to work. But unfortunately, due to this car accident, the way that the car was hit, it basically smashed the entire back seat, leading to the death of both Abraham and Jesus.
We have a lot of people here. Señora, ¿tú estabas manejando? Sí, ahora viene el rescue's gonna take care of it. No. Why are we saying that? Okay.
But then when the police walk over to the white Mercedes, they look inside and realize that no one is in there. So they start asking all of these bystanders, because at this point, this was a very intense and loud car crash that caused a lot of bystanders and a lot of just strangers to run over to the scene to make sure everyone was okay. So the police start asking all these bystanders, did you see where this person went? They clearly got out the car. And as you can see from the photos of this accident, this is not just a fender bender accident. 2 people died in this accident. Every victim that the police found at the scene needed to go to the hospital afterwards. So the fact that this person was just able to get up and walk out of their car completely fine is very, very concerning. So these bystanders started to say that they actually did see a person walk out of the white Mercedes wearing a red hoodie, and told them which direction the person walked off in. And actually, on security camera surrounding the car accident, you can see a woman wearing a red hoodie and gray sweatpants, basically just trotting her way along the side of the road, completely away from the car accident. And so when the police start heading off into that direction, that's when they start seeing a cluster of cars right by the entrance of the highway. So they're a little bit concerned, but when they get a little bit closer, they see a woman lying topless in the starfish position, just staring up at the sky, and she's lying on the ground in the middle of oncoming traffic, just laying there. And right above her, hovering over her, is a construction worker that was working literally right across the street. And when the police went up to the construction worker, they started asking him, like, do you know who this is? And he said, no, I was actually just working across the street, and then I saw this woman and she tried to get into the car, like basically break into someone's car as they were driving onto the highway. But obviously when this person locked the doors because they didn't want her to get inside, she, I guess, got frustrated. So she ripped off her hoodie and just laid down in the middle of the road. And so this guy ran over to make sure that she was okay, to see if she had gotten hit, but she was clearly not in a good headspace. She kept on repeating very odd phrases. She was just staring at the sky, and the man said that he was just kind of standing there to make sure that she didn't get hit, but he also felt very weird trying to help her up because she's currently topless. And so he doesn't really want to touch her, and he also doesn't want the people around her to think that like he's involved in this. So he was just kind of standing there waiting for police or someone to show up. And so after speaking with the construction worker, that's when the police started speaking to the woman on the ground, and they can see for themselves that this woman is clearly not in the right state of mind.
I need extra help here, and I think I have two in the vehicle that have passed away. I'm not sure.
Ella está bien. Ella lo que pasa es que quiere irse.
4361 and 4365. Also surveillance responding on the 315. Hold on traffic at Miami Near 701 4365.
Block is on the corner.
Are you
Block
okay?
is on the corner. Get blocked.
she okay.
Get blocked. I know they answered to heaven. I know they answered.
4365.
I know it's in the crystal. The crystal.
Being right on routine.
And in this clip, you can see that this woman is unfortunately on some sort of drug, and she also unfortunately peed herself, which could be an indicator of her having so much adrenaline that she's kind of lost controls of her bowels. And so that's when the police start asking her for her name. And even though her name is Macy, she says that her name is Mercedes, which is actually the name of the car that she was driving just a block over that is currently crashed. And so when the police ask Macy, you know, what are you on right now? Are you on any sort of drugs? That's when Macy starts repeating 2C, 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 2C.
My mole. Yes, I died in the crash.
Now, what car are you driving?
A white car.
White what?
Mercedes. My name's Mercedes. My name is Mercedes. Mercedes.
Calm down.
I'm from the future.
Awesome.
Oh, crystal ball. You can live off me.
Are you on drugs?
Yeah. 2C. Oh.
Now, in that clip, after she says that she's on 2C, you can audibly hear the officers kind of wince a little bit. They're like, ooh, like, why? And it's because 2C is actually a street name for pink. And for the rest of the video, I will be referring to it as pink cocoa because I think you already know what it is. But surprisingly, pink cocoa, if you don't know what it is, it's a very big party drug, and it's gotten especially popular within the past 2 years at clubs and raves, and a lot of people enjoy it because of the color of it. But what a lot of people don't know is that this cocoa isn't even real cocoa. This product actually contains no cocoa at all, just a bunch of white powdery substances that look like cocoa, and then they dye it pink so you don't really know what's in it. The reason why it's referred to as cocoa is because usually this sort of drug you will snort, and so it's very similar to regular cocoa, but nowadays it doesn't even contain any of that. It's literally just a cocktail of different drugs. And for those who don't know what pink cocoa is, it's basically, well, okay, so When pink cocoa was first created, it was created by this man that was trying to make a specific drug that had hallucinogen effects, but also was an upper. And so that's when he created pink cocoa. And basically what it was, the original recipe, was essentially just cocoa mixed with MDMA, aka ecstasy, to get hallucinogen effects. And then he also put in caffeine to basically act as a stimulant and spike the effects of the cocoa and the hallucinogen. And this was referred to as pink cocoa. But back in the day, it also included this chemical compound by the name of 2C. And 2C is actually a chemical compound that is a stimulant. It's basically supposed to give you a very euphoric feel, but it also enhances the hallucinations that you will get off of the MDMA/ecstasy. So that is what it originally was. Nowadays, when it is sold, it's not sold with any of that. The only thing that it's still sold with is the hallucinogens, the ecstasy, as far as the rest of the ingredients in the drug. But nowadays, pink cocoa actually doesn't contain any of that, because nowadays what it actually contains is a mixture of other chemicals, such as MDMA, a bit of caffeine, because again, they want to add more product to it, so it makes it look like you're getting a lot more for what you're paying. And they sometimes also lace it with either or. So it's basically like regular cocoa, or at least gives you the same upper, the same stimulant feeling of cocoa, but it also adds hallucinogen effects. But these things are not just things that you should be taking. And the reason why some like productions, like people who make this, will put things like and in it, because are one of the two most highly addictive drugs. And so if they put and they put, then this person is basically microdosing on and, which is going to make them want more, and it's going to make them want to purchase more, buy more, get more of that feeling. They're going to run out of it quickly, and then they're going to buy even more. And then next thing you know, you're going to be going 80 and a 30 and murder 2 people in the process. And a lot of people really do gravitate towards this because it looks fun. I mean, it literally looks like fun dip. It doesn't look like a drug. It doesn't look scary, but that's purely because it's pink. If you put something colorful in front of a person's face and everyone else is doing it and everyone else is having a good time, then why don't you try it too? But every single batch of pink cocoa is different from the next because there's no exact recipe for it anymore. People basically just use the scraps of other drugs, other highly addictive chemicals, mix it together, and then there's your pink. So when Macy tells police officers that she is on 2C, of course, they start freaking out a little bit. They start, completely understanding why she's acting like this.
Relax.
Listen, you need to come down.
Watch my eyes. The water. The water. Wait, we live in a dome. This is the Hollywood Sea.
The devil is real. The devil is real.
So at this point, the police are now blocking off the entire road. Again, the road that leads to the highway, the road that everyone needs to go on to get to work, to get to school. They block off that entire road and they try to treat Macy. They try to track her heart rate, her blood, to make sure that she is still alive and functioning. Every time they ask her questions, she goes on all of these rants. She starts talking about how she's a psychic and that she has a crystal ball. And every time the police try to lift Macy up off the ground, she immediately screams. Even when she's put into handcuffs, she rolls over on her back, still in handcuffs, and she just screams, and she crosses her legs, kind of knees to her chest, and she just screams so that nobody can pick her up, nobody can touch her, even while the female officer is trying to cover her because she's still topless at this point, mind you. So the female police officers are trying to, cover her up, but she doesn't want to get up. She just keeps on screaming. And so because of this, they also had to block off the road. And I also saw a couple of comments comments about this body cam footage. A lot of people were just wondering, like, why didn't they just pick her up and then like bring her to the side of the road, or why didn't they just force her to get up? But the reasoning for that is because, as you can see, Macy clearly is not in a good mindset. And so if she is sustaining injuries, she doesn't feel any of it. And because of how intense this car accident was, every single victim on scene had to go to the hospital and 2 people died. And so if she's just so casually walking around, like, there's no way that she just has no injuries. And even afterwards, when she went to the hospital, she sustained a lot of injuries from this car accident. So the police were also very scared to touch her in a wrong way that, may break her arm or break her leg. They don't really know what's wrong with her yet. And so they basically just sit there with her and they wait for the ambulance to come. And then she finally gets on a gurney and goes to the hospital. And so even when she's in the ambulance, the entire time, you can definitely tell she's just out of it. She's just staring at the ceiling. It doesn't really seem like she knows what's going on, but she does have like some sort of awareness, because when the officers ask her where she is, like if she knows where she's at, she says that she's in Miami. So she knows exactly where she is. So there is a level of consciousness to her at this point. But for the most part, she is just spewing nonsense. They try to ask her questions such as, are you diabetic? Are you on any medications? But she then just splurts out random nonsense. Again, she starts saying very spiritual things. And then there's one point where she looks at the paramedic and says, you love me, don't you? You love me. Say you love me. Say you love me. I think at one point in the ambulance ride, like from this body cam footage, you can't really see what she does. But I think at one point she tries to rip off all of like the things that she's hooked up to on her arms and her hands. And then immediately they try to pin her down to make sure that she's not going to do anything. But again, like you can tell that there is still some sort of level of awareness to her at this point.
Love, we love. You love me. You love me. You love me. You love me. You guys love me. Please,
Macy, what's your last name?
Lathers.
Maddox?
Lathers.
Mathers.
Lathers.
Got it. What's your date of birth?
And towards the end of the ambulance ride, that's when one of the paramedics asks Macy if she knows what just happened. And she just says no. And that's when he tells her, well, you were in a car accident. Do you remember what happened after the car accident? And that's when Macy just says, oh yeah, I do remember. I actually died. So who is this Macy woman? So this woman is actually named Macy Marie, who is an Instagram influencer from Albany, New York, and actually got her bachelor's in business from University of Albany, and grew up in a very small town in New York called Fort Plain. But growing up in New York, Macy was obsessed with the nightlife. Although she was going to college, she was also described as a very big party girl. She loved to drink, she loved to go out, she loved to experiment, and that was kind of her college experience. But she at the same time kind of wanted to make this nightlife lifestyle her full-time lifestyle. And where do you go when you want to have like the best nightlife where, people usually go there for the nightlife is Miami. So after college in 2022, that's when she decided to move out to Miami, where she got a job as a bottle girl and was just trying to make her way as an Instagram influencer. And when she came to Miami, that is when she really started to fall into her party lifestyle. She was described as the type of girl that you would always see at parties. She was always drinking, she was always dancing, seeming to have a good time, until people started to realize that the only time they ever saw Macy was at parties, kind of as if Macy never really wanted the party to end, so she would just hop from party to party to party all day long. And in late 2023, it seemed like Macy was kind of living her best life. She was filming herself on boats, on yachts. She became a ring girl for a lot of really big boxing tournaments, such as BYB Extreme Boxing, which is a very big bare knuckle boxing organization. And this was just something that she did on the side. And also something that she would do on the side was graffiti art. She was actually pretty decent at art, and this was something that she would do a lot and kind of post little videos online of her doing this. And in the beginning of her time in Miami, she was trying to make connections, and that's when she actually landed a spot on the Fresh and Fit podcast. And if you guys know anything about the Fresh and Fit podcast, you've definitely seen like the clips of it. It's basically these like two men, and they're at this huge table with like a bunch of women, and they just make them feel terrible about themselves for like an hour and a half and just ask like the most outrageous questions. Like, to me, I think it's a little bit of rage bait, but then a little bit of me is like, no, I think they're actually just like that. And so Macy was featured on this podcast, and this podcast will be very, very misogynistic. Like, literally the beginning of this podcast episode with Macy, the two men make all the women go around and say their name, their age, and their body count, and like what they're interested in when it comes to a guy. As I said, this podcast is just really, really weird. And a part of me honestly like feels a little bit sad when I watch these podcasts, because it just makes me so sad and infuriated that these women are just kind of like sitting there taking it, and they're just getting mocked at and joked at, and it's really sad to watch. But I also kind of assume that like they're probably getting paid a lot of money to be there, and they probably sign something to say that like they could get their money taken away if they do something. I don't know, but Macy ended up being on this podcast.
No, I feel like if you're mature, that shouldn't be something you're worried about. You know, you should worry about bigger things than, as little as liking pictures and shit like
No,
that.
I mean, how are you crazy? Like, do you stab niggas? Do you run them over the cars?
I'm not that crazy. I mean,
she runs into cars. That's what she does.
You can get me to a point where I don't care, and then I'm gone. Like, I'll cut you off, and like basically, it'll be like you died to me.
Damn.
I guess like that type of crazy, not like slash your tires and shit. I mean, if you're going to slash my tires, I'm going to slash your tires, but that's different.
And for context, this podcast was actually 2 years before the crash, because at this point she had just gotten to Miami. And so for the most part, like a lot of her responses on the podcast seemed kind of level-headed. She seems to be a very spiritual person, which is probably why when we saw her on the ground and also in the ambulance, she was speaking very spiritually. She was calling herself a psychic and how she had a crystal ball and she could see the future. But on this podcast, she seems to be a very spiritual person. She goes on to say that she went to college and then she moved to Miami and now she's just working as a bottle girl. But although she says some, pretty decent level-headed responses, there are some really crazier responses that she says. Like this one part of the podcast, she basically goes on to say that it's okay for a man to cheat on their girlfriend if they're cheating on her at a party, which makes no sense, but that was like something she agreed with. She also went on to say that she wouldn't mind being the main chick in a situation. Like if her husband or significant other was just out there like cheating on her or having like a side thing, she didn't really mind that unless she was like getting provided for and getting taken care of by him, which is so messed up because you're basically saying that you don't want love and you just hate love and you don't want it, because that's literally what that is. But you start to see a little bit more into Macy's personality with all of this. She also goes on to say that she sees a psychic once a month and that she's also read the book The Secret, which is actually a really, really big book in the spiritual community. But when she was taken to the hospital, she was actually given a toxicology report to which she was indeed found with a mixture of drugs, but surprisingly, no alcohol. Not a drop of alcohol was found in her system. It was purely just a mix of drugs, and that mix of drugs is probably the pink cocaine. After she was released from the hospital, she was actually allowed to go back home on house arrest until her trial. And as far as Macy's trial, her very first hearing was actually with a very famous judge by the name of Mindy Glazer. And if you guys don't know who Mindy Glazer is, she was actually the same judge that worked with Nikita Dragun when Nikita Dragun got arrested that one time for like battery or something.
I gotta set a bond. It's a $2,000 bond. If there's any reason you can't afford to pay a bond, use the free phone at the jail to call the public defender's office, and they can readdress this with your division judge. All right?
And Your Honor, may I ask one question?
Sure.
Do I have to stay here in the men's unit still?
Yeah, I don't make the rules up there, but they should make a proper accommodation for you. You should be in a separate area. You can contact the bondsman to try and get you out.
She was the judge because that happened in Miami, Florida, and Mindy Glazer handles most cases in Miami. And there was also that really, really popular clip of Mindy Glazer where she was the judge and she had recognized the defendant as a person that she had like went to middle school with.
13303. Okay, Mr. Booth, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you go to Nautilus for middle school?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm sorry to see you there. I always wondered what happened to you, sir.
Oh my goodness.
This is the nicest kid in middle school.
Oh my goodness.
He was the best kid in middle school. I used to play football with him, all the kids, and look what has happened. I am so sorry.
Oh my goodness.
Mr. Booth, I hope you were able to change your ways. Good luck to you.
But with Macy's case in specific, Mindy was not so forgiving. She was not so, lighthearted. This was a very serious act. This was a reckless and fatal car accident.
She's an absolute danger to the community based on killing two or driving when she shouldn't have been in a car. And she's clearly impaired based on her statements.
She was under a mixture of substances and then decided to get behind the wheel. And not only did she get behind the wheel, she chose to drive recklessly. She chose to drive 80 miles an hour in a 30, run right through a red light and kill two people. This is not just, someone using drugs and then they accidentally do something. This is a lot more serious than that because two people lost their lives because of what Macy chose to do, to be selfish. And at Macy's trial, they actually showed the security footage of when Macy had crashed. And then even after the car accident, she decided to be even more selfish and just walk away. She didn't care about the people that she hit. She didn't care about the well-being of anyone that she just hurt. She simply just walked away and let everyone else deal with it for her. And then when she walked away, she tried to break into a car to try to get away from the situation. But then when she wasn't able to get away, she completely just gave up defeat and sat in the middle of the road, possibly injuring herself and others around her. Again, a very selfish act. And on top of all of that, if it couldn't get any worse, Macy didn't even have a driver's license because Macy had her driver's license suspended about a year ago because of a DUI and not paying her parking tickets. So her driver's license was completely suspended. How she got this car, I have no clue because I'm pretty sure you need to show a valid driver's license in order to buy a car. And so not only was she driving this car on a lot of drugs, which is something she chose to do, she also drove this car without a license. She has literally had an opportunity in the past after losing her license due to a DUI. That should have been a wake-up call for her to, maybe stop doing this and to start getting Ubers, to start working on her life, but she didn't. She simply didn't care because even at the time of her getting her DUI and her license suspended, literally she could never get a license ever again now because of that situation. you would have thought that would have been a wake-up call for her, but it wasn't, because even in that moment, even when the court was telling her, you are not allowed to drive or be on the road because you are a danger to people on the road, she didn't care. She didn't understand or even care to understand the extent of her actions and what could happen if she gets back on the road. She just decided to ignore all of that, be selfish, and do what she wanted to do. As far as Macy's defense, they tried to defend Macy and say that she was just this small town girl from New York, and then she went to college and she's a graduate and she got her degree in business, and then she moved to Miami to try to get her start in business, but then started getting involved in the wrong crowds, and then that led to her addiction, and then that addiction led to her crime. But the defense tried to argue this a little bit and say, well, actually, we don't think Macy was completely out of her mind at the time of the crime. She actually did have a level of awareness to her. And even where you see her level of awareness, she still acts like a reckless person. When Macy got into that car accident, she knew that the accident was her fault. She knew that she had messed up. And so what did she do? She got out the car and she walked the opposite direction. And they even played the security footage at the trial of this moment. And what you see is Macy is walking the opposite direction of the crash while everyone around her is walking towards the direction of the crash. Because as I said, this was loud and everybody heard it. There were joggers, people walking to school, people walking to work. Everybody was crowding around that area to make sure everyone involved was okay. And at one point in the footage, you see Macy realize, oh wait, I'm actually walking the opposite direction of the crash while all these people are walking behind me. That might look a little weird. Maybe I should turn around and walk in the direction of the crash so I look like everyone else and I blend in. And that's exactly what she did. And then furthermore, again, showing a level of awareness at this point, she walks over to the next block and tries to steal a getaway car. She literally tries to get into a stranger's car, and then when she couldn't do that, she completely gave up, took off her hoodie, and just laid in the middle of the road and stared at the sky until someone came to get her. The defense also argued that possibly she had taken off her red hoodie to make herself non-identifiable because, you know, usually if you're walking away from a crime scene, you would say, oh yeah, I saw a person in a red hoodie and they walked that way. So maybe in Macy's mind in the moment, she thought of that and she was like, oh my God, people are going to recognize me. Maybe if I just take off my hoodie, I'll just be this random person in the middle of the road and nobody will know what I did, not realizing that her hoodie was literally 10 feet away from her. Like there was no hiding it. She literally threw it in the middle of the road, very close to her. And I think the most infuriating part about this whole story is, as I said, this car accident happened at 6:45 a.m. And as I also said, Macy was always going from party to party to party. And so where was Macy even coming from at 6:45 in the morning? She was actually coming from a friend's house because the night before, a couple of her and her girls decided to go out, have a fun night out, and then they all went back to her friend's house, to which Macy slept over at her friend's house and then woke up and decided to drive herself home at 6:45 in the morning. And I think that's the most infuriating part because it's not like it was difficult for her to go home and not drive. It's not like she was coming from a club where she was thinking, you know, well, I can't drive because obviously I feel crazy, but I also can't call an Uber because if I call an Uber, my car might get towed because it's in public parking. There was none of that. There was no conflict. She was at a friend's house, and she was at a friend's house that made her feel safe enough to where she could sleep at that friend's house. She could have called an Uber from her friend's house to her house and then slept all day. And then when she's feeling sober, she will then ask her friend to pick her up and then take her back to her house to get her car, or she could easily just call an Uber to her friend's house to get her car. There were so many things she could could have done. She could have even asked her friends to take her home. She could have just slept there the rest of the morning and then asked one of her friends to take her home if she still wasn't feeling well. There was so many things for her to do, but instead she slept, she woke up, she took more pink cocoa, and then drove home and killed 2 people in the process. And in the end, Macy's charges were DUI manslaughter, aggravated factor of failure to render aid, 2 counts of DUI causing bodily injury to another, 1 count of reckless driving resulting in serious injury, 3 counts of driving without a license resulting in injury or death, 2 counts of vehicle homicide caused by failure to stop and leaving the scene of an accident involving death. And with this long list of charges, Macy still is in jail awaiting her trial. She was not put on house arrest. The first time she was actually put on a $140,000 bond, to which she made that bond, and then that's how she was able to go home on house arrest. But this time around, she does not have a bond. So she is sitting in jail awaiting her trial, and they keep on changing the trial date. They said at first that her trial was supposed to be in November of 2024, but then completely changed the trial date to June of 2025. So I'm not really sure when exactly her trial date will come up, but it should be sometime this year in 2025, and then we will officially see how much time she gets for this crime. And yeah, that is the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys found today's video interesting, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are on YouTube, or if you are on Spotify, Apple, wherever you can find podcasts, make sure to rate it 5 stars because that really helps me out a lot. I would love to hear all of your guys' comments and opinions about the case in the comments below. A lot of people were paying a lot of sympathy towards, and I kind of say it like that because, like, I don't know, like, a lot of people were just paying sympathy towards Macy, saying that she probably could be a functioning member of society if she were to just go to rehab and be off drugs. But the thing is she's had opportunities like that in the past. Her driver's license was suspended, and usually when you get your driver's license completely taken away, it's not because of one little thing that you did. It's probably multiple things that were reoccurring for you to have your license taken away. As I said, I don't even know how she got that car without a license, and she was driving that car knowing she had no license. There were so many choices that she made throughout this entire case and throughout this entire event that could have changed everything, but she just chose to be selfish. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that in the comments below. What are your opinions on the case? How much time do you think she deserves? Do you think she deserves life, or do you think she deserves a second chance? And yeah, that is all from me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day today. And as always, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.